G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live brought to you by Crowcast. Lots to talk about tonight, bit around on the news front in the AFL, so without any further ado, let's crack straight in, shall we? Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Night Live this Tuesday night, the 10th of May. I'll just bring myself into focus there. There we go. And it wouldn't be Tuesday night without my offsider and good friend Peter. How you going, Peter?
I'm very well, thanks, Fame. We wouldn't want to see you out of focus. It sounds like a very, very troubling Sunday morning situation that you find yourself in.
I did have a very troubling Sunday morning, actually, but we won't go there.
Don't go there.
Look, thanks to everyone who's joined us on Discord and also on YouTube. Of course, if you want to have your say this evening, then please feel free in the Discord stage to stick your hand up and would be delighted to have you on. But in the meantime, Peter, what do you think about the shellacking we copped against the Blues on the weekend?
Well, it's one of those many games you've just got to throw into the bin after going through this process. And the most positive, I think, spin you can put on it is that there are a number of players whose games tally will inch forward by one. And there are a few positives out of it. I actually really, and I didn't hear discussion Sunday, but I actually really liked the move of Jackson Hately to Cripps. I think that was a worthwhile investment, and I think that it's a difficult balance because you see, we've been, I think, rightly criticising the club for sticking with a stale and old midfield that is never going to get us anywhere, and I think that you keep yourself competitive in games a lot of the time, not all the time, but in a lot of games you stay competitive with that kind of setup. Now, clearly, Jackson was not going to be competitive with Patrick Cripps. So that's just an investment. That's just, and you're just accepting that you're going to get some hurt and there's going to be some damage out of that. But what you have to sort of hope and wish for is that, Jackson was in for, what was it, over 20 CBAs?
Yep. 24, I reckon. Pretty much all of them.
Yeah, and I tweeted today that he's in his fourth year in the system. He's only played 19 games, but he's in the fourth year. So this is the first time he has played inside midfield in his career, and yet he was drafted on the back of a good performance in the 2018 champs as South Australia's inside mid.
Yeah.
Now, GWS, the midfield was packed, so that was difficult for him. So that's why he came here. And then we have our usual midfield non-development. And I was just really, really pleased to see that they actually bit the bullet and were prepared to accept some pain for the sake of some development.
Yeah.
I guess what I say is don't scream that we want midfield development, but then also be upset that Jackson Hately had his pants pulled down as a 19-game player against one of the best in the competition.
Yeah, look, 100%. You can't have it both ways, can you? And my biggest gripe about the weekend setup was simply that it was the boys' first or second game together in that midfield combination. It should have been about their 20th.
Exactly.
So
exactly. It's terrible that it's that we're behind, but here we are, and you've just got to make a start. And Jackson Hately, he's an inside midfielder, and you've got to make a start on developing these kids. And he's his form in the SNFL, he couldn't have done any more in the SNFL. playing as an inside midfielder, as our number one midfielder. So you've just got to, you've got to bite the bullet, and you've got to say we've got to get this kid to 30 games. I mean, they've got to leave him here. They've got to leave him there for the rest of the season, Fiend. And if you want to make a call on him at the end of the year, then well and good. But I mean, at the end of the day, he had 15 possessions, half a dozen tackles. He wasn't horrible.
Well, I thought it was the best game he's played for us, to be honest with you. And I think one of the reasons why Cripps cleaned him up a bit around stoppage was to do with Riley O'Brien, because I'm sure that Riley O'Brien's colourblind. And our midfield setup was completely wrong in terms of where O'Brien was putting the ball. He was basically putting it into Cripps's path half the time. So I don't blame Jackson for that, and I think as the game wore on and he gained more confidence, he had a little bit more to say around the packs and around the ground. And I'm with you. If we want to develop him as an inside midfielder, we have to persist. And if at the end of the day he comes up short, well, he comes up short. We've given it a crack, and he's given it a crack, and we can move on knowing that that he's not the answer. And I think that's the same for a few of our players. We're young, and we're going to have inconsistent performances, and it's no coincidence, in my opinion, Peter, that the two losses that we've had in the last fortnight have both been to very mature midfields, very big-bodied, mature midfields, because we just get brushed aside.
Yeah, that's right. And we're talking about how good is Charlie Curnow now. What a journey he's had. I mean, when was he drafted? 2015? He was in the same
like that,
draft as D-Day, wasn't he?
I think so.
And this will be the first season he's really looked like he's coming on.
Oh, he had a season before he did his knee where he looked like he could be Kuta-Fides, but you're right. Even Petrarca and Oliver have taken the best part of 100 games to get to the standard that they're at. So look. Having said that, I think the writing's on the wall for one experiment, and that's Billy Frampton. I think my fear was always that if teams tried to funnel their offence through Billy's man, then he'd be found wanting. And I think, as good as he is on the rebound off half-back, as a one-on-one defender against a big-bodied forward, he hasn't got that defender's instinct. He plays it like a forward. He's ball watching and ball hunting, and either someone's got to teach him that defensive action, or he just hasn't got it in him. One of the two.
So here's a question for you then, Fiend, and I put this to you.
Yeah.
We've invested a few games in Billy, and he's shown potential to be a pretty decent standard AFL footballer.
Mm-hmm.
Do we give up the defensive experiment but say there's maybe somewhere else we can find for him on the field, or do we say, look, that's it, you're gone? Could he take a run in the ruck? Could he, is there a spot? Could we try him again up forward? Do we say, look, that we've seen enough to say that he could be a player?
He's got the skills to be an AFL footballer, in my opinion. The problem is his game style doesn't match his body type, does it? Because he doesn't really... I mean, he excels at SANFL level as a key forward. Every time he plays forward in the SANFL, he cleans up.
Did he play in the ruck?
Is he tall enough for the ruck? He's 200, so that's tall enough for the ruck. Look, I have no problems in experimenting with him, particularly with the situation we've got with O'Brien being so sadly out of touch. The thing that I worry about is that we have to give Josh Worrell a run, and Josh Worrell really isn't a key back either. So we have to sort something out in that defence. I still think as beg pardon.
What position did we draft Josh Worrell for, do you think?
Well, I think we probably... I don't know, Pete, to be honest. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I thought it just something like came to me the other day. That I just thought, why did we actually pick him? What spot on the field did we see for him? Well, someone in the chat says a do-day backup. You don't use the pick in the mid-20s for a bloody backup player. He's supposed to be on the deck. The interesting thing about Worrell is that he was a accomplished forward in his under-18 season.
Yeah.
I you know, I don't know. I think in terms of defence, when we're playing against teams that have two solid key forwards, like we had on the weekend with Curnow and McKay, I think Nick Murray is the second key defender that has to come in. He's spasmodic at ground level, but he'll give you a contest in the air, which is what we lacked against Carlton. So a bit of a horses for courses, but then you look at what we're coming up against next week. Brisbane are down a couple of key forwards. I think Hipworth might be back, but certainly McStay's out, Danaher's out. So it's an opportunity maybe to bring Worrell in because we won't have the need for big tall timber, and maybe it's an opportunity, as you say, Peter, to try Billy. So here's a question for you: Is Billy a modern day wingman?
Maybe. I'm open to that. I didn't rate him at all, but I kind of feel like I've seen enough that there's a player there somewhere. You've just got to find the right spot for him. And I wouldn't think that was a crazy idea at all because he's just so agile. He uses the ball well, and he actually covers the ground pretty well too.
Yeah.
I just think that agile, 200 centimetre agile, good ball users don't grow on trees. No. You have to really shake this one down, Fiend, to make sure there's nothing there.
Yeah. Well, I think the forward experiment is over for Billy. I don't think he's ever going to be a standout. Well, I mean, it's hard to say. He's not actually. He's been in the system a while, but he's not that old in terms of games played, etc.
He's barely played 20 games.
Yeah. I mean,
he just looks so comfortable at the level, doing what he does well, which is, getting off his man, running the ball, using the ball, carrying the ball. He's actually, I don't know. I just think there's got to be something there. And look, maybe there's not, and then you end up flicking him. But I just think that he's not I don't think he's a key forward. I don't think he's a key defender. So I'm just not sure where he fits.
There's a lot of people going hard in the chat, D-list and all the rest of it. Billy Frampton has shown enough at the level, in my opinion, that if we can't find a spot for him, he's got value on the trade table. He's not a bad player. He has, as I said, he suffers from being a medium-sized player in a tall player's body, and he's probably a yard shorter pace to be that really tall wingman kind of person. Is he a mobile ruckman? I mean, he hasn't got the energy, but he's certainly got the same qualities as a Jackson type, and far better foot skills. I don't know. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Pete. I just don't know what the answer is.
I don't know what the answer to this riddle is, but for all those people on the chat that are just saying just discard him, I just think you have to put yourself in the position of recruiters, trying to build lists, and you ask them how many 200 centimetre agile good ball users there are out there. There's just not. And so it's incumbent upon us to do everything that we can to find a spot for him now that he's shown that he's capable of football at the level.
Crowies, we didn't say Billy was 20 years old. We said he played 20 games.
Yep. So anyway,
just a lot of hate, for Billy. A few weeks ago, we were.
I was on that train last year, as you well know.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, we were touting him the second coming of Christ down back. So anyway, that's a bit of a dilemma. Speaking of dilemmas,
I think what we saw on Saturday was a reality check. Sunday was a reality check of where we're at, and then it's going to be another difficult season, and the difference between having 15 games into a player and having 25 games into a player isn't a huge amount. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought Chase had a good game. Again, he's a player that what would he be up to now? 60 games?
Chase Jones? No, not that many.
No, 40 games maybe. I can't remember.
Let me have a look.
It just takes a while.
Barty Magic should know this off the top of his head, of course, but need him. Come on, Vardy,
Anyway,
see if you can beat me. How many games
whatever
does
it
Jones
is,
play?
he's around that mark, and it just shows you that you've just got to get games into them, and for the first 0 to 40 is not easy.
Yeah, 45 games.
45 games. I mean, Rochelle started off well, so well, but he made some poor errors on. He looked like he'd just come down to earth on Sunday with some of the errors that he made.
Little mentally tired. That's going to happen, Pete.
Sorry?
Mentally tired. He's an 18-year-old kid.
Exactly.
A couple of big losses. Things maybe not falling his way 100%. He just looked a little bit mentally tired. I think there's an opportunity to bring a couple in. I think Pedler needs to have a run because he didn't play last week and Samford got a rest this week. So 2 weeks out of the game for Luke is not good enough. I think you were right. I think it was you about Gallant. He looks a little bit tired. So there's an opportunity for Rowe to get a full game. Luke Pedler to come in. Maybe Worrell up forward in place of Lockie Gallant might be a way to go. At least you can swap them around if it's not going so well.
Kids through.
Yeah, so it might even. I mean, look, we're going to get towed up against Brisbane. It's as simple as that. All we can ask for is an effort. I think Macca certainly on the weekend was a bit disappointed with our intent. I thought our intent was okay until they got the first couple of goals after half time, and then we really kind of dropped our bundle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. We did lose the bundle a bit, and then, unfortunately, Marvel's that kind of deck, isn't it? That if you just take your eye off the ball sort of for 5 minutes, the team can kick 8 goals. And
yeah, exactly.
Look, I've just, I'd rarely ever tip us at Marvel. We just don't seem to play that ground well. And
no, we used to.
Teams like Carlton and Essendon just play it so well, that ground. And so no, it was always one of those games. You just, it's just a trial game, and as much as all of the supporters out there want the rebuild to be over, it's just not, and it just won't be. It's not going to be over for, a good couple of years yet. So you just got to try and continue to pick through the positives and just sort of tinker and in your own mind sort of tinker about, what's this going to look like? Who do you think is going to be that piece that will stay there, and just gradually have it take shape, and then 1 year it'll come together. But it ain't going to be this year, and it probably won't be next year either.
No, do we have all the pieces yet, Pete? I reckon we're 2 drafts away yet, at least maybe 3.
Definitely not. We do not have all the pieces at all, and every year we say this is the year we really need to try and build this midfield, and yet we still find ways to spend our drafts on in other areas. But all we can do is just say, reiterate again this year that we desperately need to rebuild that midfield.
Yeah, agreed. O'Brien, I know the club. I know he's rusted on, but they dropped Crouch the other day. I honestly think it's time to give Kieran a bit of a run for a while.
Absolutely has to go. He's just been rotten. With all due respect to Riley, has just not played well, and he would be the first to admit it, I'm sure. He's just not played well, and they just need to spell him, I think. Yeah,
he looks like he needs a rest.
We seem to have this obsession in this football club, though, that you're only allowed to have one ruckman on your mate, that plays A-grade football for all season. It's been going on for years.
Yeah, well, Sammy Jacobs, I'm sure he played a few games in a wheelchair towards the back end of his career.
We'll end up having 2 ruckmen in 20 years. Ridiculous.
Well, and here's another question. They're both 20. Well, I think Kieran Strawn's 26. I think O'Brien's a similar age. Even if we bring Strawn in, the question I pose is he the ruckman going forward? And if that's not the case, do we need to have a young protege on the back end of our list learning his trade for a couple of years?
Yeah.
I think that's an area that might bite us in a couple of years because I don't see O'Brien ever being the ruckman he wants to be. He wants to be the best ruckman in the AFL. He's just not going to be.
The thing is that Riley has never ever been a good tap ruckman. Not at any time in his career. But what he has been, he's been a very, very good around the ground player.
Mm-hmm.
And once that falls away, then there's nothing left.
The thing is,
has fallen away. You've taken 1 mark in 2 games.
Yeah, that's right. And he's not even getting to contests. The thing is, though, we do see the problem with Riley is he doesn't like jumping into an opposition ruckman. So he becomes very predictable because he comes from an angle which actually limits his hit zones because he's only hitting to one part of the ground. And as I said earlier, it played right into Cripps's hands. For O'Brien to be any good or worth carrying in centre bounce contests, he needs to be able to at least nullify contests, but he doesn't. He either wins them poorly to the back of the contest where the opposition runner is, or he's just putting him in the same area all the time, becomes very predictable. So, I don't think is the answer. I think we need to look at someone, a kid coming through. I certainly wouldn't spend a lot of draft capital or anything on one. I don't think you need to, but I'm sure there's some bloody young SANFL ruckman or VFL ruckman running around that are worth putting on the list and seeing how they go.
Let me put this to you and to the people in the chat as well. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. That there is this. It's a common perception that you don't need to spend much on a ruckman until you don't, and you end up getting what we've got. And you look at Melbourne, and you look at Jackson and Gawn, and there's a pick in the mid-30s and a pick in the top 5.
Yep.
And so I don't know, and I'm not going to take a position on this, Fiend. I'm just putting it out there for discussion. Because, you can look at Brisbane and who's the bloke that they've got's off the rookie list. I can't think of his name now. Big bloke that they've got. So, I just wonder, is that a furphy? Do you think that you don't, you think that you don't have to spend on a ruckman until you get a cheap one and then you end up in the position that we're in?
I think Pete, over the course of our time on this thing, I've always been a proponent of you do what you need to do with the draft to get what you need to get. And, some people get very hung up on, he's not a pick 5 or he's not a pick 2 or he's not a pick 10 or, it's a reach or whatever. I don't buy into that sort of stuff. I feel like you've got a certain amount of picks and you pick the players that you feel you need wherever you need to pick them. It doesn't matter about draft value. I think that's a hyped up, overrated statement. And Melbourne's draft in that year, I think it was 2019, that they got Jackson and Keziah Pickett and the other bloke I can't remember. They absolutely nailed it. They nailed it. And those players, none of them, I think, went... Well, certainly Keziah Pickett and Jackson. Neither of them were touted at the picks that they went for. But they were both perfect for what Melbourne needed at the time. So... Do you need to spend to get a ruckman? I think you need to do what you need to do. If there's a ruckman there that you need to, and you're in need of a young ruckman, more than you're in need of anything else, then go for it. I mean, Melbourne didn't need midfielders. They needed someone small up forward, and they obviously identified a need for another tall. And it was a bonus for them too that they picked up Benny Brown cheap in trade. But they did what they had to do, and I think we need so the caveat, I guess, is that for us in our position, I don't think we need to be spending picks that we would otherwise pick on midfielders at this stage.
And it may well be, right? It may well be that Riley is still going to be potentially that ruckman as well. Because I've always, as you well know, I've always believed he's more a ruckman than he is a key forward, and I think that he's better value because I think he doubles as a midfielder. Where he has got that potential, and so he could be that player. He could be that Jackson type player.
Yeah, it was now. God, who was it that came on? I think it was Rabbit that came on during the week on the weekend and said exactly that. That we've already got our next ruckman on our list, and his name's Riley Thilthorpe. And I'm warming to that. I think that. We need to have Riley Thilthorpe in the game for as much as possible, and having him as a forward, where I don't think it actually plays into his strengths because he's always going to attract a big defender, and overhead marking, in my opinion, in pack situations isn't his forte. No. But he's got great wheels. He's fantastic below his knees. And he is a good ruck, so let's get him in there. So at least as I've been saying for a few weeks now, at least on a rotational basis, we've got enough tools that are okay to be able to run 2 or 3 and run the triangle from forward to midfield to bench sort of thing. Why don't we do it? Why don't we try these things? There's no harm in trying these things, and you could even run Billy Frampton into that equation as well. Run Frampton and Thilthorpe through the ruck and through defence and through the forward line and mix it up a bit.
Yeah, and I can just imagine if we get Riley going in the ruck, then. Hamish at the end of the year is going to say, it leaves us without a key forward, can I just go one more tall draft?
Yeah, but that'd be Keeler, wouldn't it? Because this year is a tall draft. Do you reckon we're any chance of Keeler, or is he gone at our picks?
I don't think it'll be gone. I think the two that are shaping of the Westies boys, Tom Scully in particular, and Lemmy. Lemmy's been playing league and in reserves. Scully's been annihilating the under-18s, and so they're 2 big key forwards, and they're genuine key forwards. They're not rucks at all. So they're clunkers, and so they could well have their eyes on them. But can you imagine? All of the punters out there if Hamish goes for another tall in the top 10.
I don't think he's going to have any choice, Pete. I don't think he's going to have any choice.
They can pick up a midfield, like an established midfielder from somewhere.
Well, I think that's the go, and maybe that segues nicely. And I'm sorry, people, I've got 15 minutes left in me because I've got to go and pick up my son from his Macca's shift at 9:15. But it probably dovetails nicely into what we should be talking about, and that is the news today that Jason Horne-Francis has put his contract talks on hold. Various whispers around that he's not happy and homesick, and it could be nothing. It could be just him trying to jack up his value because he's already probably North Melbourne's best midfielder. But you would think that, given that he's on a 2-year deal, you would think that North, if he isn't going to renegotiate, they'd try to get most value out of him, which would be this year.
Oh, that'd be as I think you mentioned earlier today, that'd be an absolute PR disaster, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't be great for them.
Got the number 1 draft pick.
Wouldn't be great for them, but they have to maximise their value for him. If he's out of contract, they run the risk if we tank another year and we happen to have a number 1 or number 2 pick, they run the risk of losing him in the PSD.
Is there any play you'd send over for him?
Oh, just about everyone.
I
was bullish pre that draft. I would have given North Melbourne 10 first round picks and your firstborn child, Peter, to get Jason Horne. I think he's an absolute superstar, and I don't think he's disappointed anyone.
I'll absolutely support you on that. You always thought that, and it actually plays into the theory you just articulated a couple of minutes ago, and that is that you do whatever you've got to do.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And what we should have done first is not win so many games. Not win stupid games against Hawthorn like we did. But having done that, I and I know that the club went hard at Horne-Francis with a deal to North, and they knocked it back. I would have gone back again and said, all right,
what wasn't that big of a deal?
Well, I would have just said, what would it take? Tell us what it would take. We should have been that desperate.
Our second next year or something?
I think it was our first that year, our first next year, and maybe a second rounder as well next year. It was 3 picks. It was 2 firsts and a second, I think.
Right, okay.
Which is huge, and North, I think, should have considered it a bit more. And I think, again, you're talking more about the look of it rather than anything else. North Melbourne's first number 1 pick for ages, and they traded away. But they needed to be realistic about it. And Horne-Francis was a huge flight risk. Particularly if they weren't successful. Why would a kid like that stay in a bloody unsuccessful franchise for 5 years? It's just not going to happen.
I don't think he was ever as a family kid. He never seemed like me the type was going to be attracted to the big bright lights of Melbourne like some of them are.
No, I don't think so. Matthew was saying Melbourne's first, and next year's first. So
that's right.
It might have been our first, Melbourne's first, and next year's second.
Yeah, I think
anyway, it was something like that. Anyway, but I would have gone back to them and said, "All right, well, which player would you like?" And barring probably 4 or 5, I would have said, "All right, cool." Wouldn't have been too many. Yeah. And I understand it would have meant that we didn't get Josh Rochelle, and Josh Rochelle is going to be a wonderful player. But Horne-Francis and Razor Ray, it will be sitting back having a beer, absolutely losing his shit hearing this. But I think Horne-Francis is a once-in-a-generation player. And, in retrospect, what would you give up for Gary Ablett Jr. at the beginning of his career?
Yeah.
That's the type of player we're talking about. So anyway, look, it's probably all conjecture. He's got ties to Port Adelaide, north of the incumbent, so they still hold the whip hand in that situation, and it's highly likely that they'll pump some more money into his deal, and he'll hang around for a little bit longer there at least and see if they get more successful. They might ditch the coach if he's not happy with Noble's sprays. But I'd certainly be on the phone every bloody day to Fabian and who's managing Horne-Francis? Is it Mick Dowdy?
I think so.
Yeah, I'd be on Mick's ear every bloody day. I'd be sending him a weekly basket of goodies.
Didn't you say he's mates with Braden Cook?
Yeah, so he does have a connection with Braden Cook. I had an employee of mine last year that was a partner with one of the South lads, and she told me a little bit about things down there. And my understanding is that Braden and Jason were mates. That's not to say he wasn't also mates with Matt Robertson. And speaking of which, North have got a couple of other young midfielders that aren't performing well. Tommy Powell, although I think he might have extended his contract. Phillips, who was number 2 in that draft, I think, or number 3 or something. He can't get a run. So it's funny old times down at North with the top picks that they've selected. They've got Simpkin there and Uniacke, whatever his name is. But yeah, so I don't know. It's too early to speculate, but if there's any truth to if it's a genuine situation where he's looking to come back home, and we did have one of our listeners drop into the chat that he was hearing from one of his mates that knows the Horne-Francis family that Jason was homesick, then, we've got to be in it. Port are the obvious danger. Port, in terms of connections, have probably got the front running, but I think we're actually positioned financially and draft currency-wise, maybe a little bit better depending on what Port do with a couple of players at the end of the year, like Amon and Georgiades, etc.
Yep.
So, the other thing, of course, is that now I want to see Sam McClure and Caroline Wilson go batshit crazy for the next 3 years because Collingwood watching pornos at the beginning of at their training sessions or their pre-game warm-ups or whatever. That's got 3 years written all over it, Pete.
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, you haven't heard that one?
No.
So it's come out that Collingwood used or one of the Collingwood coaches has a motto of "come forward," and he used used a pornographic film to illustrate that that motto, Pete, and it was fairly graphic, and it was certainly not vanilla. And it's between that and the Lumumba stuff, the recording today that came out of Buckley basically telling Lumumba that he was gone rogue and thrown Eddie under the bus and all the rest of it. If the blowtorch isn't on that club for the next 3 years from McClure and Caroline Wilson, then it just illustrates to you how biased the Victorian media are against non-Victorian clubs. Because Collingwood need to have the media spotlight on them 24/7 for the next 3 years.
That's extraordinary. I'm just blown away by that. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I'm stunned.
Yeah, so Lumumba's some saying Lumumba's gone a bit crazy. Well, I think Lumumba's just speaking the truth. And I think he's the type of, he's the type of bloke that is not going to walk away silently. And the thing with what he's saying is he's got evidence to back it up. Every time he gets rebuffed by Buckley or Maguire or whoever, or the Collingwood Footy Club, he comes back with evidence. So, I don't think Lumumba needs to give it a rest at all, Surfs Oz, because if you were being vilified in your workplace, you wouldn't stand for it. And the Collingwood Footy Club is his workplace, or was his workplace. And I think he's got a right, just the same as any other employee in Australia, to work in a non-discriminatory environment. The end. That's my view.
Jeez.
Sorry, mate. I just got on my soapbox for a minute.
I'm just trying to process.
Look, and then you've got the West Coast situation, which is a bit out of control. West Coast's a very strange club. For all their success, they seem to be dysfunctional for large parts of their lifespan. You got Trevor Nisbet, who's rusted on harder than bloody Eddie Maguire just about at Collingwood was. He's been there since, I think Nisbet's been there since about 2008, I think. Presided over a couple of crises there, and the drug crises and the party culture and all the rest of it. Now you got half their team going out on the piss when they're supposed to be locked away because they got no players. And what odds?
You had two needles alongside each other, Fiend, and you had clubs that were sort of like one needle was towards being an absolute fun party club to be at, and the other needle was success. I reckon the closest point of those two needles, where the two needles kind of meet for success and partying, that equals West Coast, don't you reckon?
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, I think the needles
the best balance of partying and success.
Well, I think the partying assisted the success in the 05 preliminary. There was some half-time partying that got them over the line. I've never seen a bloke run so hard as Benny Cousins did that game. But yeah, very strange club, that one. And as PJ said in the chat, when they tank hard, and they always seem to bounce back really quickly. There's tons of examples of them, bottoming out, and then 2 years later they're top four again. It's like, compared to other clubs, when they just seem to go to the well and then rebound real quick. So they do things differently over there.
You go to get it all for a 10-year period just to get it all. I reckon, that's the club you'd want to go to. You get everything.
Yeah, I think you would too. Just quickly, before we wrap it up, our injury list is fairly clear. We've only got Rory and Seeds on the injury list. Taylor is back from his thumb. Lockie Murphy, this is the one that surprises me a bit. They've given him the all clear. Burgess admitted that they were a bit concerned about him. They described him as getting a big hit against Carlton, but I didn't see it that way. I've actually felt it was a bit innocuous, Lockie Murphy's hit that he stayed down on. And I'm actually surprised they're not treating that with a little bit more kid gloves, even though the MRIs, etc., seem to be clearing of structural stuff. I don't know. It worries me.
If I was in his close inner circle, I'd be having a very, very strong word to him about, his future and the best thing for him going forward for a long and healthy and prosperous life.
Yeah, I guess they can only go on the doctor's advice, but just every time he goes down over the last few weeks, he seems to be holding that neck, and I just feel like maybe they just need to read the tea leaves and give him a month off. It's not as if we need him to play. It's a shame because, again, a great round contest on the weekend, but it does worry me. Now, people going off that I'm not giving away tickets tonight. I'm not going to give away tickets tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the ticket draw until when's our game this week? Is it Sunday? Saturday? Saturday night. I'm going to leave the ticket draw until Friday. So if you want tickets, and I'm going to put this on Twitter as well because we only ever seem to have one or two people sticking their hand up. So I'm going to give it a few days to run. So if you want tickets for this week's game against Brisbane Lions, then stick your name, no chatting or else you'll be banned for a week. Stick your name in the tickets channel. It'll be going on Twitter as well and the other socials to get onto our Discord and put your name in the tickets channel if that's what you want. And then I will do a very little live streamed, recorded number generator thing so people know I'm not cheating. And I will draw that on Friday afternoon. All right, so and I reckon anyone who wants to go to the game on the weekend's probably a bit masochistic anyway, Pete.
I just can't believe this is one game that I'm going to actually get to, and it's a Saturday night game. It's got the best time slot. I can make it, and it's going to be a horror show.
Cold too. Wally, on Twitter, we're just at AFL Crowcast, mate. So if you're not following us already on Twitter, get around us on Twitter at AFL Crowcast. And in the meantime...
who would have thought that around about this time last year we'd knock off the Ds? You just wouldn't have predicted it in a blue fit, so you just never know what's going to happen.
That's it. You don't. Having said that, what's your tip?
Oh, Brisbane.
Yeah, I can't. I thought we might bounce back last week against Carlton after getting shellacked by GWS. Brisbane got another very solid midfield, Pete. And
absolutely right. And I just hope that I can, when I turn up on Saturday night, I'll see Jackson Haitley in the centre square for the first bounce. But I think that we're in for a bit of a cold, dark sort of 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. Well, we got West Coast in a few. We got Lions and Cats, and then we might have a bit of respite. I think that the respite will be the mid-season bye. A bit of other news too. Young Freeman's decided to go back to Victoria, so to pursue other interests. Freeman's his name, isn't it? The lad that we had over on. Yeah, he's decided to pull up stumps and go back to Victoria. So we've obviously told him that he's not going to be picked up in the mid-season draft. We do obviously have the option in the mid-season draft because we can put Sloaney on the long-term injury list. It would be interesting to see what we do there. If you had your choice, Peter, would you go for a ruckman or a mature age midfielder?
You know what? I'd do what we did last year, and I would look at where we picked up Paddy Parnell. I think there's probably still some young talent out there that I think there's probably still a little bit of COVID hangover where kids might not have necessarily been able to put their best foot forward. I think that Paddy was a really good pickup. I still think he's going to be a good player for us.
Yeah, hopefully
he's a talented kid. I would be out. I would actually do what Hamish did last year, and I would treat it as any normal draft. I would look at best available talent, and I would look at best available young talent. Because I still think we've got there's a bit of COVID hangover out there.
Can we put a minimum of 180 centimetres on that? You'd be walking around Adelaide Oval, and like if you're a tall bloke, you'd be really worried about like tripping over the garden gnomes, wouldn't you? There's so many of them. Anyway, I reckon we'll get shellacked too. Look, thanks very much everyone for joining us this week. Fairly short and sharp. Thanks Peter for coming on as well. Don't forget tickets will be drawn on Friday, so if you want tickets to the game, stick your name in the tickets channel on Discord, and for those listening, you'll have until Friday lunchtime. I will close it off Friday lunchtime to put your name down for a ticket to the Brisbane game. In the meantime, stay safe, Peter. Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, mate. Take it easy. Catch you next week.
We'll see you next week. Night, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.